I'm a
I'm a
normal guy, just like
self-developed.
everyone else, Hank. Everyone just sits there and says, "So you're so cool," and I'm like, "I'm not."
Okay. Well, hey, today I'm thrilled to welcome Hank Brown, a portfolio manager at CoreForce, firm specializing in cyberspace operations and full spectrum security solutions. As a Marine Corps veteran with 20 years of service from 93 to 13, retiring as a lieutenant colonel, he holds an MBA, certifications in project management, and CISP. He's also an alumnus of the United States Naval Academy. His career spans cyber missions, leadership and defense contractors like Northrop Grumman, extensive volunteer work as a military transition coordinator, where he coaches vets on networking, resumes, and civilian careers paths. Hank's insights into leveraging military discipline for cyber roles and disaster preparedness are invaluable for transitioning service members. Hey, welcome, sir, and we're looking forward to your guidance. Is there anything that I missed in there that was important to you?
No, that was nice. I appreciate that. I'm trying to change my view so I can see all of you. That's great.
Oh yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
It's always super easy with Zoom. You know, if you use different platforms, you're like, where's this button for that? Hey, so start off easy. Can you kind of share your journey from serving in the Corps to being a portfolio manager at CoreForce and cyberspace ops?
Yeah, so I'm really a business development guy. I have a portfolio of work that we go after. Some people are going to wrinkle their nose and be like, I don't want to be in sales. Um, I try to join organizations that have something that is additive to the mission. Every one of you, if you were on active duty, probably used some piece of equipment or had a service that was crap. And you're like, what, why can we not do better than this? Why don't we have better gear? And it's because the acquisition process is very problematic. Current administration, for whatever it's worth, is working hard to try to change that. But that doesn't mean it's changed yet. It just means it's in change. And so when you have a process that is not all, it's aligned to things like fairness and creation of jobs and pork barrel politics and all that stuff, you don't end up with the best piece of gear or service. You end up with something that reflects all those different stakeholders. So we need leaders in this space who are committed to the mission to try to bring the best services and equipment to the military, and that's where I largely work. I have been a program manager running a cyber security team for satellite ground stations. I've done strategy for a large company. I've had I ran a profit and loss for a business out of Washington, D.C., but most of what I've been doing is business development.
Cool. So, I mean, what drew you into that work? I mean, I got a good idea, but kind of like to hear you elucidate it.
Well, I think I just covered it, and that
Yeah.
is that I want to continue to serve. I think that as veterans, a lot of us find ourselves feeling unmoored or disconnected at times. And one of the things that we have lost being out of uniform is the what I call baked in fulfillment that comes from putting on that uniform every day. And that may be fulfillment that comes from mentoring another service member, or it may be from doing some type of operational mission. But it doesn't naturally exist outside of being in uniform. And so I think we all need to collectively seek that. And so part of me seeking that is availing myself to speak at things like this. I talk to some TAP classes. I have a very Bush League book on Amazon that I make $0 on. That is just my lessons learned from transition. And so a lot of the points I might bring up in here are a reflection of what I've recorded there. And that's just to try to serve you, because I miss service. I miss being a Marine. I don't miss being in the Marine Corps, but I
Yeah,
do miss the service that comes with it.
I think the best way I've heard that expressed is I miss the clowns, but I don't miss the circus.
I like that.
I think it's something we all feel that way about. So can you tell me like kind of like what your day-to-day gig is? What does that look like, as you roll into work in the morning and roll out at night?
Yeah. So, I mean, is the purpose here that we're trying to like communicate? Looks like there's, I don't know, close to 100 people in here.
Yeah.
What my job's like, so they can think, well, do I want a job like that? Or help me out with the purpose here. I don't mean to start questioning
Well,
the
some of it's
questioner, but
no worries. So some of it's just career exploration to kind of see how you got from where you were to where you went and like the steps that you took, what drove you there. the passions that you had, things that line up with the people here. Because, one of the things I've noticed working here is that it's almost like watching the first 2 years of college, freshman and sophomore, where they come in like, I'm going to definitely be a project manager. And then like 3 weeks later, well, I'm going to get into cyber. And then, hey, this is what I finally found, and all those steps that it took to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for, and forgive me, because I don't know like where in the journey, maybe you could characterize that for me. Everybody is like, I see beards. So, obviously people are out, at least some of them are out. Is this like, is there like a window around this, or?
Yeah. So almost everybody in here is on their skill bridge. So they're still technically in the service, doing the skill bridge and trying to figure out what do I want to grow up, and how do I get there?
Okay, good. So my recommendation is that you put yourself through a process. But first, let me give a caveat, because Ernest gave my background, and so you hear officer, and some of you may be thinking, well, he's an officer, so it doesn't really apply to me if you're enlisted. Officer and enlisted is terminology that the military has placed over us. It should not inform your aspirations or how you see yourself on the outside. The company I was with before this one was called Peraton. Our chief financial officer, the number 3 guy in the company, was a corporal in the Marine Corps, and he had colonels and admirals and generals reporting to him. Right? It's what you make of it. So if you tell yourself that matters, right, then that could be your, placing your own inhibition on yourself. But, the generalization I would make is the younger and hungrier you are, the more successful you're going to be. And there are plenty of people on the outside who hire veterans. And I had a vice president in Northrop Grumman. He was asking me for some help one time to find some talent. And I thought he wanted like some type of senior advisor or something. And so he asked me for like, hey, do you know anybody? I said, well, I know Admiral so-and-so or General so-and-so. He's like, no. I'm looking for people who are ready to get out here and work. Now, I'm not saying senior officers don't work, but they're used to having a team. And in the real world, it's usually individual performers, not staffs that get stuff done. So I just want to say that so that you're not like, for one, dismissing what I'm saying because you think that I come from something different. You get to define this for yourself. You're a veteran. And in my world, we are all mixed up in terms of O&E and all that. I talked to the TAP class this morning. A guy that I hired in my old company that I brought with me to my new company. Love him. He's fantastic. Retired Navy chief. Great deal of respect for him because he got his degree while he was serving in the Navy, while he was a dad and had kids at home. That was a lot harder than me but I mean, there's lots of enlisted folks who do that, right? Who get out there and get after it. That level of work is impressive. And I also know a Navy chief that's like super toxic. And I try to keep like, some type of fire support coordination line between me and him at all times. Right. So all I'm getting at is, and I could do that for any rank, right? Because your rank is not a reflection of how you're going to do on the outside. It's your initiative. So I encourage some introspection. Number one, who are you? Not who did the military tell you to be. I went in the Marine Corps and wanted to be infantry. They said artillery. All right, roger that. I'll be the best artilleryman I can be. I applied to go to a school to do political science. They're like, finance, roger that. I'll be the best finance guy I can be, right? And opportunities came from that. But on the outside, you have the whole blossom or bloom where you're planted. That's a BS statement. That doesn't actually work, right? I live in Tennessee, and if I walk outside my door here, it's 40 degrees, and I planted a cactus, I'm like, blossom where you're planted. Is that cactus going to blossom? Of course not, right? It's not the right environment for the DNA in that living being. So you need to plant yourself where you will blossom. In order to do that, you need to know who you are, not who you were told to be. Most of us joined the military when we were basically kids, big kids, maybe young adults, but we were kids. And so our formative years are, what the military told us, but that's not what society is. And there are going to be things that happen on the outside that are contrary to your worldview as an adult. Like if you use, I was taught, you rate this, you don't rate that. Okay. If somebody on the outside hears me say I rate something, they hear me say I'm entitled to something. And if you are somebody who's a hiring person and you hear somebody talking about what they're entitled to, that is not attractive at all. If you think as a veteran, and this may sting a little bit, people are like, oh boy, I want more veterans in my organization. Unless they're a veteran, that is not happening. We all relate to people who have a shared experience with us. That's one of the things that's problematic about the promotion boards in the military is those boards pick people with similar career paths. And so my first company I went to was a commercial IT company, no veterans. I didn't understand them. They didn't understand me. And that was a problem. I had a big role, but on the end, if y'all ever looked at like organizational behavior, have like the formal org chart and then the informal org chart, informally, I couldn't get anything done. Nobody respected me. Don't care what my rank was. They didn't know the difference in a lieutenant and a lance corporal or a lieutenant and a lieutenant general. They're just like, oh, you were in the military. Thanks for your service. Okay. And that's just a platitude. I made the mistake of confusing people like respecting what I had done and thinking that I could come into their organization and be a high performer. They did not make that assumption. If you think about the military organization you were in, some type of high performing unit, pick what you did. We were talking about, halo and hey ho, right when I finally figured out the dial in for this thing. If somebody who's like, a high performing computer programmer joined that special operations unit and are like, hey, this person's done all these things, they're smart. That doesn't mean that they could all of a sudden become a special operations guy or gal, right? They don't have the experience. Well, people look at you that way too. Hey, that's cool what you did, but that doesn't mean you can do what I do. And so there aren't necessarily lateral moves, and it's not even necessarily good to do a lateral move. Now, there's a spectrum here. If you're in a job and you're like, I'm just going to pick something I'm familiar with. You're working at DISA. You're a Navy communications technician, and you're working at the Defense Information Services Agency or whatever DISA stands for. And you're going to get out and you've got a GS job, in the same room, same office, same people. They're going to understand you, right? But if you're a Navy communications technician and you're going to go work for some IT company in Idaho, they're not going to necessarily understand you. And there's an adjustment that you have to make in order to learn your new operating environment. So my recommendation is an incremental approach as much as you can. I like to characterize it. If you get that book, hey, it's $3.93, money back guarantee. If you have constructive criticism, I'll send you $4. I'm looking for the copy of it right now. So it's lame, right? That's it right there. It's a stock cover. You can even see this is like marked up. There's a Kindle version for 99 cents. Again, I get nothing for this, right? I get 1 cent, right? Amazon makes me turn a profit. So I get I get royalty checks for like 37 cents every month. So banking that for my retirement. So if you read that and just to waste your time, waste your money, I'll send you $4. Just hit me up on LinkedIn. So in there, I defined the W's. Who do you want to be with? What are your income requirements? What do you want to do? What do you not want to do? Where do you want to live? All those things are in tension with each other. You're not going to be maxing out all of them. And so if you take the time to say, who am I? And this is what I did. I didn't have that guidance. I hadn't made this framework yet, but I had other veterans mentoring me. And I said, okay, here's where I think those things fall out. And I made decisions. And you know what? Half of them were wrong compared to where I am today. But I think it's Eisenhower said, the plan is worthless, but planning is essential, or something like that, right? Look it up. The planning is what benefits you, because you get into execution and you feel dissatisfied and you've identified those things. It enables you to help figure out what you're dissatisfied with. And if you do it incrementally, if you change as few things as possible, that doesn't mean don't change. Be a courageous person and make changes in your life. because the more optimum you are here, the more productive you will be. So I said I was going to live in Maryland, not work for the DOD in the military industrial complex, wanted to be with my wife and kids, did not want a long commute. I'm trying to think of what I didn't want to do. And I wanted to make more money, right? Those were my W's. A year later, I said, I'm willing to make less money. I want to work in DOD and I don't want to commute because I took a commute. So I was still right there, still with my wife and kids. A year after that, this was another job change later. I said, I don't care about money nearly as much. And I don't want to live in Maryland anymore. I want to live in Tennessee, where I'm from. When I was in your shoes, I said, I will never move back to Tennessee. Never. There's nothing for me there. 2 years later, after being gone for 25 years, I couldn't wait to get back. In fact, I basically risked everything else, and I was succeeding my job at that point to move back to Tennessee. And why is that? Because I was doing self-discovery. I grew up like running around in the mountains in Tennessee, and now I'm like stuck in a neighborhood with the homeowners association breathing down my neck about my yard. And that's okay, but it wasn't okay for me. Right. And so you wanted it. I did that with some level of abandon that I was fortunate it worked out. There were some tough lessons in there for me, a catharsis at one point where I had started my own company and then lost the contract that we had with the National Security Agency. But through that, I also learned about myself and what was important. And so my encouragement is identify that I'm going back. Who are you? Identify those W's and then make incremental changes so that you can go back if you need to. So what if I'd gotten out of the Marine Corps, taken a commercial IT job, moved to Tennessee at the same time, and I felt dissatisfied? Was the problem Tennessee, or is the problem commercial IT? Or is the problem I just feel, weird about not being in uniform anymore? Which is, for all of us, going to be a component of that. Even if you hate being in, when you take that uniform off, you're going to have some loss of agency or identity that over time you'll fill back in, right? Some people always cling to that military identity. Some people come back to it. There aren't wrong answers here, by the way. It's what's right for you and the people who depend on you. So long answer there. Don't know, Ernest, if I hit the answer, but that's my thoughts about it.
No, that's all good stuff. I mean, you mentioned the communication thing. That's something I personally talk about a lot. Is we speak in different languages. How did you find to change that communication? What personal changes do you have to make to figure out how to speak corporatese rather than the normal language that we speak?
Yeah, I probably still struggle with this because I find when I try to soften my tone or my words that I'm less effective frequently. People in corporations will often speak with a lot of nuance that I don't even perceive. I had a boss one time who said, "Hey, I talked to you about this." I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. On another occasion, somebody asked me for feedback, and I wrote what I thought was this very complimentary. It was feedback on this conference he had hosted. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I'm new in the company, so take that for what it's worth. If there's anything in here you think is critical, let's talk about it, because I'm not trying to be, I try to take all the edges off." And I sent him this thing, and I thought it was complimentary. At the very end, I said, "If there's one thing I might work on, it would be this. I wish I had this now so I could 12 years later, look back on it and see how I would perceive it now." So he didn't talk to me about it. He sent it straight to the CEO of the company, who took a personal affront at it. This guy had a company of 5,000 people. He probably was taking home, $50 million a year. So he had a big ego. He sends an email back to me and copies his whole staff on it. So think about it'd be like the division commander sending an email back. But he copies everybody. He says, "Hank, rank yourself as an IT professional on a scale of 1 to 10. I was about 3 months out of the Marine Corps, and I looked at my wife. I was at home looking at my phone, and I said, I think I'm getting ready to get fired from this. And I didn't. But when I resigned from that company a few months later, it was a bad fit for me with them. They did not make me a counteroffer. And so, if if you're doing well at a company and you want to leave, then when you resign, they're going to ask you to stay. And they did not. It was not working out. So I was just slightly ahead of them in terms of like hastening my departure. And that's the way you want it to be, right? If you're not a good fit somewhere, you don't want to wait for them to tell you. Because if you do, then you may have a gap in employment, which is uncomfortable. It could affect your ability to get cleared. If you have a clear job, it could cost you a lot of money. You just don't want to do that. A slight lesson learned within that, if you do have an employment gap, this is a little TTP. You can start your own company. Start your own company as a consultant, offer your services as a consultant, put that on LinkedIn. And you don't have to tell your next employer what your rates were. You don't have to tell them if you made money or not. But what that does is two things, maybe more, three things. Keeps you in the game. If you have a long gap of employment, that doesn't look good on your resume. It's the first thing people want to ask, like, hey, why the long gap of employment? Sometimes things happen. You want to have a simple answer for that. But if you don't have a gap of employment, it may, and you've started your own company and offering yourself as a consultant, it may even find the next job for you, because companies might have a short-term need. You come in, you start kicking butt in that company, and they're like, holy smoke, Julia here, I'm just looking at the screen, came in here. She's kicking butt. We need to find a job for her. A very funny thing happened for me. I was talking at a tap class. I was at the end of that. I was in that consulting role, and a guy comes up to me after the tap class. He says, hey, Hank, I saw that Northrop Grumman has this role that's perfect for me. And he and I knew each other from being in uniform. I said, yeah, what is it? I looked at it and I was like, I said, you should apply, but I wouldn't spend a bunch of time on that. The reason I didn't was because Northrop Grumman had taken my resume when I was a consultant and created a job around my resume and was going to bring me on as an employee, right? That's what you want. You want somebody to take your resume and create that job. That's ideal. It's very hard for other people to compete when they've done that. So it's just a lot of people don't have the motivation to do that. But if you do, it will create opportunity for you.
So how do you go about starting, a business like that? I mean, is that, hey, I have to do an LLC, or you just open up a page?
Yeah, a lot of people will make it harder than it needs to be, because you can really just offer yourself as a 1099. I've done both. My wife and I have probably started 7 different businesses, I think, when I counted the other day. Most of them have not been super meaningful. The one where I offered myself as a consultant was, and I did not start an LLC. You would want to consult an attorney, but ultimately, if you do I can tell you from doing LLCs, it creates an additional administrative burden, additional taxes that you have to keep up with, additional interaction with the state government, which can be challenging. And a lot of times it's just not necessary. You may study up on this and say, well, yes, but it creates a veil of protection to prevent me from being sued. If you are liable, a competent attorney is going to pierce that veil and come after wherever the money is, he or she's going to come after it. And so what I do instead of the LLC in most cases is I just maintain a very large umbrella insurance policy in case anybody comes after me. So in most cases, the short answer is you can offer yourself as a 1099. You don't have to start the formal business. But consult your attorney and an accountant. Both of those cost money. Both of those over the long period of time will save you money, as well as save you heartache and pain.
So talk to me about CoreForce. What is it? What inspired you to start it, and where are you going?
To start in it, right? I don't own CoreForce. I'm an employee at CoreForce. Right?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. So I was with a large integrator. It was time for a change for a variety of reasons. And a mentor of mine was on the board of advisors at CoreForce. And what I did when I decided to make that change was I reached out to a small group of people. Now I'm well networked at this point. And I said, I'm looking for a company that adheres to the principles found in this book, Good to Great. And one of the companies I interviewed with, they actually had like a little monument on the CEO's desk for Good to Great. So I knew that he was all about it. If you haven't read this, I would take a look. One of the things in here is like, if you get let go from your company, it can be one of the best things that happens to you because you were clearly not in the right seat on the right metaphorical bus. And so that creates time and space for you to make that change. I was creating that for myself, but I was definitely trying to get on a better seat. I wanted to be in a company that was more agile, that was more technologically based, that was not owned by private equity, which was a key part of it. And that valued its people. And so Coreforce is privately held, 650 people. We are about 40% veterans, 80% cleared, serving missions in our national security space. And there's a lot of innovation. And so I wanted to be more of that kind of non-traditional defense contractor, which competitively in this environment is the way the wind is blowing right now as well. If y'all are paying attention to the news, you see, some of the big companies, are kind of on the naughty list, like Deloitte, Accenture, et cetera. And so I have friends at those companies. They seem to be doing fine, but I wanted to be in a company that was smaller and more agile.
So what is it that Coreforce does specifically? Can you discuss that?
Sure. Some of it is in classified spaces, but we have 3 business units. One of them is focused on innovation, like Air Force Research Lab type stuff. They make things like they make some special visor for glass. One of them is traditional IT, so IT enterprise services, and then I'm in the group that supports cyberspace operations, and we're largely defensive focused, but Coreforce brought me in to help them grow into offense. So,
like at a company like that, what is it that, when somebody applies that catches their attention other than, hey, he's got top secret clearance, is his job or her job, is there anything in particular that you say, hey, this is your silver bullet for this type of a company to make sure that they know you have this skill?
So I don't think I'm going to answer this directly.
Okay.
If you are applying to a job requisition, then I'm hoping that you've been coached in this. Then you need to take your experience and build a fresh resume for that application that reflects that application. You should never deceive. That will catch up with you. I have caught people. It should always be an honest assessment. But here's a little tip that can help you get around it. Let's say that job description had a need. It said, you need to be a CISSP. And so if it's a big company, then there may be a computer that's screening your application before a human being ever sees it. And know that even when a human being does, recruiters are a cost center in a company, i.e., they do not make money, right? Their efforts result in the company making money, but a company is going to invest as little as they can in their recruiters. So recruiters are going to typically be young, and they're going to be overburdened because of that being a cost center. So you want to make that recruiter's job as easy as possible. So you've built your resume using, again, and never give away your integrity, but using the words that they use so that the filters will see those words, right? And then if there's something that you don't match, then cover letters, if it's fluff, like, dear Miss Talent Acquisition Person, I would really love to work at this company. They don't care about that. But if you say, dear sir or ma'am, I'm very interested in this role. I see there's a couple of requirements that I don't match up exactly to. I've included in my cover letter this matrix that matches my experiences and capabilities to your requirements. I see that. So then you start in the left-hand column, requirement, certified information systems security professional, right-hand column. I'm not a CISSP, but I am a CISSM, right? So the computer would miss that. But what you've done is you've just put the word in there saying, I am not this, but Now you make it through the algorithm, and they can see that those two things, by the way, are very minimally different from each other. The example I've used. I see that you require a PMP. I'm not a PMP, but I have 10 years of experience in project management, and I am currently enrolled in the project management boot camp and is scheduled to take my exam on January 17th. So I have a friend who wasn't military. He went to church with me in Maryland. He had gotten married kind of early, dropped out of college. He was succeeding in that national security space, but he's starting to run into a ceiling, and that ceiling was no degree. This is another tip. So I said, a lot of times a job requisition in the national security space will say bachelor's degree or PMP, project management professional. He's like, Hank, I'm not a PMP either. I said, on your application, put that you're enrolled in the boot camp and that you are scheduled to take the exam. That got him through the algorithm. The company hired him. Sorry, I've talked a lot today. I'm hoarse. The company hired him, then paid for the rest of his boot camp, and then paid for him to take the test. And he's the chief operating officer of a company today with no degree.
I love that.
So you see how if you like, your resume is not a place for you to like communicate how you're creative. No pictures, no colors, no flowers. Hold on, I'm just dying here. I got a cough. I don't know where the mute is. I turned it off earlier. Hold.
Yeah, we've all had these days.
So I'm on Eastern time. I'm looking at my calendar. I've been talking since 7:30 this morning with 2 30-minute breaks. So apologize. That's my excuse. Cough drop hopefully will help. So your resume should be just the facts. No mistakes, no grammatical errors. But I mean, heck, you got AI to do all this to help you fix all that stuff now. But people are where your personality, where you, Bria, as a special snowflake, are going to be identified by that company is not through that resume process, but through people that you know. So I see, let's just change the order of things a little bit at the company I'm with, CoreForce. Let's say I had seen the job requisition first. And I'm like, dang, I'm interested in CoreForce. So get on LinkedIn. Who do I know at CoreForce? Well, I actually knew 2 people at CoreForce. I reached out to them. Hey, I'm thinking about applying for this job. If it's a friend, he might say, hey, Hank, don't do it, right? I'm leaving. Or might say, yeah, let me help out. If you reach out to me and we know each other, then I'll be like, yeah, what's that job requisition number? Okay, I'm going to look it up in the system. I'm going to find out who the hiring manager is. And then I'm going to reach out to that hiring manager and be like, hey, Chris Banzit's applying for this job. We know each other, from the military. You should take a look at this. That might like fast track his application, through the process, gets you past the filters. And then Chris reaches out to me and be like, man, I never heard from him. So I go back to the hiring manager. Oh yeah, man. I forgot. I'll take a look at it now. Or, hey, that position is no longer, open. We've closed that position. Those things happen. A majority of job openings that you see are not actually real at that moment. Why is that? It's terrible. I've got a veteran buddy who's like trying to create an internet application that will screen through that stuff. There's several reasons. One, they filled it. They've changed their mind. The contract that they were thinking about putting you on has gone away. Or this is terrible. The company is basically putting up a false flag. They're trying to like communicate that they're growing. So they put all these, it's like chess. They put all these job recs out there. See how we're growing when they're really not. So there's right or wrong that's out there. And so you want to try to, navigate through it. So find somebody in that company. So you may be like, well, I don't really know that many people. The less you are networking, and that is developing relationships of trust, then the less opportunities you're going to have. And it's like dating. You know, I'm not saying it can't be painful sometimes. You reach out to somebody, and Mr. Wynn, how do you say your name? Is it Pang? P-A-I-N-G? Pang, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Penguin.
So, yeah, Penguin. All right. So I reached out to Pang. You know, I see that he works at Acme, and I want to provide a job there. I don't know anybody at Acme, so I get on. I'm looking up employees at Acme who are in the Marine Corps. I say, I don't know what service you're in, Pang, but I'm like, Pang, you and I were in the Marine Corps. We were at Camp Lejeune together. I'm interested in joining Acme. You know, would you be willing to have a conversation with me? Pang. He sees it on LinkedIn and he like marks me as junk, or, you know, just ghosts me entirely, right? That happens. It happens. But sometimes somebody's gonna be like, sure, I'll be happy to talk to you about the company. People, especially if they don't know you, are not going to badmouth their company. Some people want to have like these long email exchanges. Don't do that. You need to like get them to be willing, you know, in person's better, but they're not going to, most professionals are not going to say something negative about their organization. But if you can read people. And so if Pang reached out to me, is like, hey, I'm interested in CoreForce. And, you know, I knew Pang. What do you think? But if I'm like, right, there's the answer. And I do the same thing. If I get somebody's resume, he's like, hey, Hank, you should, well, you know, look at Jordan's resume here. He's thinking about, you know, applying to CoreForce. You've got this job opening. And so before I read Jordan's Webster's resume, I'm going to get on LinkedIn and see who I know that knows Jordan. I get on there and I see that Ernest knows him. And so I reach out to Ernest. I'm like, hey, Jordan Webster has applied for a job with me. One of two things is going to happen. Ernest's going to be like, man, he's awesome. I worked with him. We served together, blah, blah, blah. Or there's going to be this silent, small, awkward pause. And then I'll let Ernest off the hook. I'll be like, hey, man, you don't have to say anything. I already have the answer. And so, in that, you know, there are no doubt people in this call who have not fostered good relationships, who have negative, we all have negative impressions from somebody about us. But I was talking to a TAP class one time. There was this guy, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, engaged. Like I can even see on the screens here right now. Like some of you are kind of with me, some of you are not. And so this guy's in the back of the class. He's all engaged. And at the end of the class, he comes up to me and he says, hey, you know, I keep applying for these jobs and it's a great interview. And then they don't call me back. He's like, what, like, can you help me? So I said, yeah, let me look at your resume. I looked at it. It's like, everything looks good. So I reached out to a friend of mine who owns a company that has contractors working in the space where this guy's in uniform. My friend texted me back, stay away. So if you've been working in a space where there's contractors, maybe you even mistreat them a little bit. Like, you know, you're in uniform. They're just some nasty contractor. But the reality is they were probably in uniform. They have more experience than you, and they're assessing your work, whether you like it or not. They may be, you know, running off and making a PowerPoint slide for you. But the reality is, if given the opportunity, they could run the place. They've just chosen that role, right? Or they still want to be in that space. And so this guy had a pervasive negative impressions about him, probably because he was a jerk. You know, in the military, you can be a jerk and still succeed. I'm thinking of some of my former bosses right now, right? They were jerks, and I hated working for them, but they got the job done. On the outside, if you're a jerk, all the good people who work for you will quit, and you'll be left with people who are scared to quit. And so jerks succeed less on the outside because they can't gain and maintain support from the people around them. So my advice to that guy was, I was like, hey man, you got to reinvent yourself. I was like, there's some negative impressions. I would recommend that you apply for a job where they're going to hire your resume, right? They're not going to interview you. They're just trying to fill butts and seats, if you will. And you start over. And you know what he did? This is classic. He got mad at me. And so his true colors came out, right? He's like, who was that? He starts like naming names. I'm gonna go talk to these people. Like he was like irately pissed off. And I'm like, hey man, you're just proving the point right now. I'm trying to help you out. and you're getting mad at me. And I don't know what happened to him. I cut ties with him after that. All right,
I bet you he
long-winded.
makes a mean coffee.
What's that?
I bet you he makes a mean coffee now.
I don't know. Makes me want to look him up. Might have to when we're done with the call here, if I can remember his name.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I found it's a lot easier to kind of hide your attitude and your thoughts and who you are on a corporate side, the military, because you're not as close. So it's probably, it's physically easier just to be a good dude on the corporate side than it is militarily, where there's that different pressure and you're stuck with each other 24/7.
And you can get away with it.
Yeah.
On the corporate side, if it's a company of any size, if you're a jerk, somebody's going to go to HR.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, there's so many things for y'all to unwrap. Like, how is it different? So I had this guy who was like badgering me one time. I was pretty fresh into the company and out of the military. And he would send these long emails to like large groups of people, basically denigrating me in my performance. He, felt threatened or something. I don't know. And I'm like getting really upset about this. And so I realized like the way I solve this is I have to go to HR. And I went to HR and I was like, hey, so in the Marine Corps, how this would work was I'd walk in his office, I'd shut the door behind me, I'd flip his desk over, pin him against the wall and tell him to cut this shit out. And she's like, no, don't do that, right? The reality is she probably should have turned me in at that point for like workplace violence threats, completely different world than I was coming from. So she's like, here's how we have to navigate this. And I didn't like doing it that way, but it's the world that we're in. I'm not endorsing flipping people's desk over. This guy was like making me seriously upset, but that would not go. I would have made myself the bad guy immediately in that situation, and it would have resulted in my termination at best from that company.
Yeah, and you would have done just like in the previous topic. You would have just proved him right. See, this guy's a problem.
Yep.
By falling for his stupid game. Because HR is going to take the alligator closest to the boat and get rid of it and say, okay, that should fix the problem.
Yeah, and it definitely would have been wrong. I mean, I'm not endorsing that in any regard. I'm telling you what in my naivete I said to the HR person at the time.
Yeah, we all get those throat punch feelings. I've said something similar to you to my boss on the corporate side. She's like, well, I was like, no, I know that's not the way. That's my feelings, but show me how to navigate this. And unfortunately, in that case, she's like, okay, I get it. Military, it's a very different thing. You're coming out of it, and dealing with HR is like a whole other world. I mean, do you have any other examples in there that you could share just to be aware of how that stuff's treated?
Gosh, I mean, I hate even bringing it up because I'm kind of embarrassed by it. I mean, that particular instance there, I think I learned my lesson. Kind of double over. Like one, you need to. HR works for the CEO of the company, right? They're not your buddy or your special private counselor, but that is how the organization, in a large organization, wants you to resolve things, is through that. So, you're not in the military. This doesn't have, it's not your life. It's just your job. And so I think part of what you said, Ernest, also was, you can be on your best behavior at work and not have to take it home. And you're not deploying with these people. You may work some long hours. I will say that one thing that informs my decision-making and looking at roles was when I was in your shoes, I had a great experience on Marine Corps Security Forces where we had some special missions and we operated a small unit. I really enjoyed, that small unit integrity. And so I translated that to, I want to be in a small business on the outside, have that same kind of like, family type environment. But what I missed was, even though that in the Marine Corps, that was a small unit, we still had the culture and discipline of a much larger organization that guided our actions. And I was part of a small business or even a smaller business that acted like families, where I'm like, ooh, I already have a family. I don't need another family. The downsides of families, the nitpicking, the bickering, that kind of thing. I want to be in an organization where people come to work on their best behavior. And so typically that's going to be in a larger organization. But if it's small, you have to kind of sniff that out. Is this an organization that operates with professionalism or not? Because for me, I mean, an unprofessional organization just carries a lot of risk with it, because there could still be accountability externally for unprofessional behavior.
Lose contracts because somebody's doing dumb stuff, and then all of a sudden 20% layoffs.
Yeah.
Big hurry.
Well, coincidentally, I was the subcontractor to that company, right? And we lost a contract.
Oh, yeah.
So the point is exactly right.
Yeah. I nailed an example. Hey, so before I let you get going, any other final thoughts or anything you'd like to share with the folks before we get out of here?
Just another tip: if you are building your network and you want to connect with me, but this goes for anybody, you need to introduce yourself, and you can't just like hit connect, because people like me are not going to accept it. Right? I've been looking at your faces as much as I can here on the call, scrolling through screens, and I see that I've missed the chat entirely. But I'm not going to remember. And, I'm moderately successful. So I get lots of inquiries on LinkedIn all the time. And if I don't know what it is, I just mark it as junk and move on. But the flip side is if I can serve you in some way, I would say, you'll have to be what I call professionally persistent, because my schedule is busy, but I'm offering to have a follow-on conversation if you think there's value in that. Not selling you anything. I'm just trying to, serve my fellow veterans as veterans served me when I was in transition also. So I'll do my best to do that. But you always need to introduce yourself on those things to build that network out.
That's great advice. And thanks for keeping an eye out for the folks, man. That's the paying it back thing is why I'm here. So thanks again, Hank Brown, portfolio manager at Core Force, longtime Marine Corps veteran. I thank you once again for coming in, and hopefully you guys check out the book, and don't ask them for $4 back and get some good advice.
Nobody's ever asked for me the $4 back, so I would kind of get a kick out of you if you did. As long as you have
Just
good
send me
feedback,
$4,
right?
Just send $4 and I'll pretend. I'll take it. I'll buy a cup of coffee. Awesome.